there anyone else there?
We have a cast of a dozen.
Okay. All right. So with regard, this is a presentation for you guys. Please, interrupt me at any point in time. If you have questions, you want me to go in depth on anything, I'm the principal architect / engineer on the virtual lab, and so I can go into as much depth as you need. But I'm going to give you a high-level presentation at the start. So we'll start off with these slides. Hopefully you're seeing them. So basically the virtual lab, it's a set of services, an IT framework, which is enabling NOAA employees and their partners to share ideas, collaborate, engage in software development, and conduct applied research. You'll get a much better sense of what the VLab is through the demo, and then hopefully we can see how it can best meet your needs. So what we're trying to accomplish with the VLab, our goal is to basically manage innovation, streamline O to R, and accelerate research operations within NOAA. The main concepts within the VLab are, one is communities, and so VLab communities allow users with common interests to collaborate using tools like forums, blogs, wikis, document libraries, web forms, and workflows. And again, I'll give you a quick demo of that. I'm told that you're mostly interested on the development services side, which is the project side, but I'll give you a quick demo of the communities aspect as well. So on the development services side, what we're focusing on are projects, and so we're trying to provide users with integrated project management, issue tracking, software repositories, continuous integration, and if you want me to go into details on what I mean by that, I can, and then also code review tools. So that's on the development services side. And just to give you some sense of when VLab started, so there was a vision team back in February of 2012. Created a document. There was IOC in February of 2013. December of this past year is when we actually rehosted. We migrated VLab over to the IDP within NCEP, and then there's a new portlet called the NOAA Projects Repository, which is being used as a beta type project by all of NOAA, all the NOAA line offices, to enter in project information, and the virtual lab, specifically collaboration services, is being used for that. So the VLab itself was designed, developed, and is being managed by the National Weather Service and Meteorological Development Lab. That's both John and I work for the lab, and it's the official source code for all AWIPS2 development baseline code, and it's the means by which people get code into the AWIPS2 baseline is through the virtual lab. There's also an AWIPS2 community within the virtual lab that's the official source for all of the AWIPS documentation, governance, and helpful tools, tips, and things like that on how to do development, installation, things like that. So that's that. So pictorially, this helps me. Hopefully it'll help you. So there's, at the top level of the virtual lab, it's broken into two components: collaboration services, which is a portal, and development services, which is project issue tracking. So the whole thing is pretty much their web applications, and then it ties into project repositories. So on the project management side, we're using an open source project called Redmine. That has interfaces with Subversion as well as Git. And then if you're using Git, you can use another application called Garrett, and it is an open source. It was developed by Google to manage one of their Linux operating systems, and so it's fairly robust. It basically provides code review, like quick code review, as well as access controls to the Git repositories. Continuous integration, we're using something called Jenkins. If you're familiar with Jenkins or Hudson, they're pretty much the same. And that's used to do nightly builds, things like that. You can also do quality checks on to verify that when people check things and that in fact they are relating their code to issues, and pretty much you can do a lot with Jenkins. On the collaboration services side, like I said, it's a portal, and it is made up of communities. The communities then are, you basically, within a community, you have your own set of tools. So these are common tools that you're probably familiar with today, like blogs, document library, web content management system, wikis, forums, and workflow. And workflow is like, I can go into a little bit of that if you'd like me to. And there's also forums. So there's a forums builder too. So if you're trying to collect information from your users, things like that, you can do that. So that's a high-level picture of it. So in both cases, the way we interact with groups is that a request comes in, and there are online forms to make requests for new projects or new communities. We turn around, and typically those are created same day or next business day, and we hand over the keys to you. We have a template that we start with, and then we provide you with, give you direction in terms of guidance, where we have wikis and users guides that we can point people to. But in terms of managing things, it's up to the requesting individuals to manage their own projects and repositories, as well as communities. And then as needed, we're there to fall back on for technical support or guidance. So VLab has been very popular in terms of its growth. So you can see that we've got quite the ramp. We haven't updated this in a few months. I should have done that. There's been a lot of growth even yet. So collaboration services, development services, and I know that we've been creating a lot of projects and communities recently too. So this gives an idea of how many repositories reside. As of April 15th, there are over 100 repositories within the virtual lab. Everything being within IDP at NSEP, everything is fault tolerant, backed up. So there's peace of mind there. So and it's being used because of its online nature. It's used across the country. We've enabled it with Google Analytics to get a sense for how people are using it, where they're using it from, and so you can get a sense. There's a big bubble there. In the East Coast and the central part of the U.S., at many of the centers, and it's being used at some of the WFOs as well. So that is the my intro, and then I'll go to the presentation or the demo itself. Are there any questions at this point?
No, please. Yeah, please continue.
So I can barely hear you guys.
No questions. Just go ahead and roll on.
Okay, I will roll on. So why don't we go ahead and get started with collaboration services. I did not mention, but the websites are accessible to anyone with NOAA credentials. So to log in, you log in with your NOAA credentials or your Gmail, username and password minus the @noaa.gov, and you can get in. When you land on the first page, you're going to see this listing of My Communities. By default, you're just going to be a member of the virtual lab itself community. It's a default community for everyone. But there will be a lot of other options for you if you want to join other communities. And so I will show you very quickly some of those. So basically, if you click on, if you didn't catch it, there's My Communities and All Available Communities. And so the communities, you can just come in here, click on Join for open communities. If it's a community that is considered restricted, meaning that the community owner has the ability to, you can make a request. I'm trying to see if there's one here. Here's one here. So you can make a request. That'll go to the community owners, and then in most cases, they would say, yeah, sure, join the community. If not, they would respond back, and you would get an email saying why you're not allowed. So anyway, that's the way you request membership. And so there are also the tool or the application does support private communities as well. So if there were a need for something where you didn't want it listed here, but you needed to be able to add people for, like for example, we use it to administer the VLab itself. We've got an administrators group, and so we have our own community, and that's private. So let's take a look at how you interact with the site. Along the top are the different pages. I'm going to turn this off because as an administrator it can be a little confusing. So you can click on any of these as are pages. On the pages, they're outlined with different capabilities. These are portlets within the pages. So let's go ahead and look at like the AWIPS community itself. And you can click any community you're a member of. If you can quickly get to it by clicking up here, My Communities, and then go to that. So I'm going to click on the AWIPS community. It'll take me to it. You can also click on it under My Communities on that first page. So the layout of the communities themselves is up to the community owners. So it's all drag and drop. If you want to add a new page, you just click on Add, and then you would add the page itself. And then you can put the layout. You can drag and drop different portlet types onto there. And so within here, for example, this is a web content block, and it allows you to display static information to your users, and then if you want to quickly edit it, there's a WYSIWYG editor to be able to do so. So you just click on Edit, it's going to bring it up, and you can make your changes there. So if you have the community owner role, or site owner role. So that's that. There's announcements. There's also forums, and so the forums are a nice way of being able to interact with your community members in terms of having like a message board. These can be tied. People can subscribe to the categories that are of interest to them, and then as things are posted, they would be notified via email, as well as notified within the tool itself. In the upper right, you see this 3 here. These are the notifications for things that I have subscribed to, and I can very quickly click on it and take you right to that item within the site itself. So that's that. I can go in here, and so we've got, you can have categories within categories. It's just a way of managing how to be able to display your content. And so within each of these, there's the ability to upload, images and things like that, or have attachments. And so, and people can make comments. So this is for a good way of capturing information that is a conversation, but it also then is there for future people coming into the community to be able to search. And in fact, everything is searchable within the site. You can click to search globally. This is going to search over all your communities, or you can search over just the community that you're within. And so, if I wanted to search over everything, I can type like NSEP or AW. I don't know if AWC is in there. We can try. So, and it's a faceted search, meaning that it's going to return from here. Basically, you can have a breakdown. These are the different communities that this showed up in that I'm a member of. There's also, it's broken down by type of content. Okay, it was in 56 documents, 2 forum entries, 1 user is flagged as having AWC tied to them, and then there's web content articles, and then wiki pages. So that leads us to the other thing, and that is there's a wiki as well. And so you can have more than one wiki, and that's good for collaborating with people. So they're common tools and things that people might find of interest. So so that's that. There's a document library too, and there's the ability when you upload documents, if they're PDFs, they're going to be scanned. The content within it is all searchable as well, so you're going to pick up on that. And in fact, probably many of those documents that we picked up were because inside of it itself, within the document, they referenced AWC as opposed to, most likely was not in the title of the document. So I'm going to, I think that those are some of the highlights that was a very quick tour of Virtual Lab Collaboration Services, but those are some of the important pieces of it. The thing that you will want to know is that if you go back, and I think you guys have probably done this to a certain point because you got to this demo phase, and that is if I go back to the main community, and if you're interested in getting if you wanted to get a community, you could click on here. The community, it's also in this quick links area, but you can request a new VLab community through the request form here and just submit that. That then gets routed to our workflow. We get notified as the admins, and then there's a workflow component built into this tool so that we can approve it and everything like that right through here. And then you would be notified. So that's there. If you're wanting projects, there are forms on the Development Services page. And so within here, at the bottom of the page, and we're going to be organizing this a little bit better. We were talking about this today. But at the bottom here, you can request a new project, specify, give us some details about it so that we know from a capacity planning perspective, how big is this going to be? Are you wanting a Git repository or a Subversion repository? How many people are going to be accessing it? And then if you have any special instructions. So for example, we have cases where someone may already have a repository and they want to start with that. And so like for Subversion, you might provide us with a dump file of it so that you're not starting from scratch again. So that's all possible. So that's the collaboration services. So on the development services side, and I didn't mention this, is using something called Liferay. It's open source, although we are using the enterprise edition of it. It's a Java-based portal framework, service-oriented. It's used, there are thousands of installations, or hundreds of thousands, I believe. And it's used by industry as well as the government. So anyway, that's that. Any questions regarding collaboration services before I move on to development services?
Hey, Ken,
okay.
You might want to quickly show them underneath the help drop down how they can request information and use the user's guide. So if they need to, yeah.
Yep, good point. So up here at the top, help. If you need help, you can click on this. That's going to take you to a page that has a lot of information on it, like our email address that you would send requests into. It also has, we have a troubleshooting forum, and then you can request a consultation. And if you've just got some general feedback for us, you can send it through this, provide us feedback. And then if you want, let's say in the future you want more information or a more in-depth demo about something, you can submit a demo request. So that's all there. There's also, as John mentioned, the user's guide. And so that's an excellent place to start when you're first starting out, and or even if you've been doing things for a while. As a community owner, these are common things that people run into, or common tasks that you run into, or questions. And so this is where you'd want to dive into that and take a look at there, so that we've tried to highlight exactly what you need to do in certain scenarios. So hopefully that will be able to answer many of your questions. And then of course you can click on Contact Us, and that'll, if you've got your default email set up, it'll just email vlab.admin@noaa.gov. And we have someone on staff, normal business hours, East Coast, and our goal is always to respond to people within an hour. So, and if we can't answer it, we'll figure it out, or answer questions. We'll find someone to answer the question. So that is collaboration services. So on the development services side, again, it's a separate application. We're using something called Redmine. It's a project management tool, and you can get to it by just clicking on this link at the top here, or if you bookmark it, it would be there. So I've got it already up, Redmine up, and so I'm just showing you first, just to give you a sense. There are a lot of projects in here. The projects are a little bit different than the communities in that by default projects are private. And so what that means is that when you request a project, by default you're going to be the only one that has access to it until you go in and add new members to it. So for example, let me go down to some of the NCO ones. So sorry for scrolling so quickly. So this is a category of the IDP Production Management Branch. So they're managing a number of projects now within VLab. And so for each of these, then there's a set of pages. And so the summary, because I'm an administrator, I can get to this, but normally you're only going to be able to get to this if you have a role within the project. And so as a new project owner, you would then have the ability to go into the settings, go into your members, and then add members to your project, and it's all role-based. So what I mean by that is at the bottom here, these are the different roles. And so if you're doing traditional development, you may have like a manager, a developer, reporter type, use those roles, and then that then dictates how people can interact with the system. So the projects themselves are, so obviously the big area within this is the issue management. And so you can see the listing of issues. This one doesn't have very many at this point. Let me go to one that's a little bit more active. So I'll go ahead and show you. This is a AWIPS 2 project that's very active. You can click on the activity just to get a sense for what's been going on. And so this is going to outline any changes that have been made, and you can filter that based on, okay, I only want to see the issues that are updated. Change sets, that's tied to the revisions or the repositories. There's also ability to have news events, upload documents and files, and then you can key off of, there's a wiki that comes with each of these projects too. So if you have information that's project specific, that's an excellent way of communicating things. The roadmap ties in with versions, so you can basically have specified different releases, and then for each release, each issue can be tied to a release or a version. And then the issues themselves, that's a listing. It's very dynamic in terms of you can have custom queries that are shared within your project, are custom to you, and that's very easily created by coming in here and just saying, okay, I'm looking at all open issues. I can then add additional filters, like I want to see only those issues that are assigned to one of my teammates. Click on that person, apply it, and then it would filter it. So that is the, and then so this very readily, and you can keep adding additional filters on there. And then if it's something that you're generating that might be useful for the future, you can then save that as a filter or a query, and then that would show up in your list. There's some defaults like all open issues, summary, and things like that. Within the tickets themselves, these are, hopefully you guys have some familiarity with other issue tracking software, whether it's Track or Jira or Mantis or something else. People tend to find that Redmine is pretty intuitive, and they tend to like it. So with each issue, there's a history associated with it. If people have checked in code and referenced the issue within the commit message, you would see the change sets listed here as well, so you can go back and forth between it. It's a very powerful tool to be able to go back and say, now what did I do there, and what code was changed for this particular issue, and that's all integrated within the tool itself. So that's that. If you're creating, so people go and update it, you can use start dates and end dates, due dates, and then things can be changed in terms of the percent complete, how much time is spent on it. So there's a lot of different capabilities built into this tool. Creating a new issue is pretty straightforward. The trackers that show up are that's configured by the project manager, and so in this case, they've got all these different trackers. You would select, what type of issue it is, specify the subject, your description, and then, the status is normally going to be new from the start, and then it would go through a typical workflow for that tracker. And we've outlined in, let me show you another spot. So within this wiki, the Virtual Lab wiki, everyone has access to this. And Help for Project Owners and Managers is a very useful page because it talks about, okay, how do I add members to the project? Show me something about the repositories, the issue the trackers, and then there's a visualization on the trackers as well that kind of gives you a sense for, okay, what roles play into these trackers, and then, so like for example, the default trackers, what are the different states and who can do what within each of these trackers. So that's an easy way of understanding what's going on there. So I think that's I think what I wanted to cover there. If you do use the issue tracking component, you also get the Gantt charts by default, and these are dynamically being rendered based upon what people are entering into their issues. So like I said, if you're using start time, start dates, and due dates, these are going to show up here. You can relate issues to one another. So if I go back, let me go back over here. And so if I look in here, issues, and we'll just look at one of these. So within this ticket, I can have subtasks. So you can have a parent-child type relationship. You can also have related issues. So if one issue is related to another, you would just type it in here. That would show a relationship between them. If something is dependent upon another, so it follows another issue, or it's blocking by it, that can all be specified here as well. And so from a project management perspective, that can become very powerful. So that's the issues. And then also the Gantt charts. So let's go back to that. So that would all show there, and that everything's been updated on the fly. Calendar is just a different way of viewing when issues are supposed to start and stop. News are what you would think. They're just news type events. And that's up to the project whether or not they want to use that capability. Some use it much more so than others. The same thing for the documents. The wiki, that's a way to provide information that's pertinent to your users, and then you can collaborate on that as a wiki would normally be, and you can then watch it so that you get email notifications when things update. And the repository is the other interesting area. This is a fairly large repository, so it's probably going to take a little bit of time to render. It's one of these things where we don't actually cache this. We don't have anything running behind the scenes, so it's when someone first hits it. So if the second person hit it would be fine. But this is a very large repo, so probably should have demoed it with another one. There you go. So this is going to show you all the different branches. If you're using within your repository, you can then look at each of those, dive into it, your latest revisions. Like I said, it's mapping back to the issues. So if I wanted to say, okay, well, what is this actually doing? I can click on this. It's going to take me to there, and you can see that the change set's there. So it's going back and forth. So then if I can go back to it and then look at, okay, well, what's actually comprised in this? And in this case, it was just one file. But I can then look visually and see, okay, well, what actually changed here? And it would generate that difference file. Most people, or if you're actually interacting with the code, then you're doing checkouts. Of code if it's Subversion, and if it's Git, you're cloning the repository, and then you're making your changes locally, and then pushing those changes up to the repo. So, there's a lot that can be done here, and like I said, the settings is only going to be available to those that have the manager type roles within the project itself. So any questions with regard to Redmine? Or
Not seeing any. We're still here.
okay. Is there, do you guys want to see a little bit about Garrett and code review? Are you guys interested at all? Would you be using the repository capabilities within the VLab if you were to move forward?
I'm seeing lots of head nods asking for a look at the code repositories, Garrett, code review type things.
Okay, all right, I'll show you that. So now, as I mentioned during the presentation or the slides themselves at the beginning, Garrett only applies to Git. So, but I'll show you what you can do there. So the way that Garrett works is that when let's say you're a developer, you've cloned the repository from the project, and then once you've cloned that repository, you're going to be working on some issues. So some issues, this is typically how it works. So someone, is either you write up the issues or someone else writes up an issue, it gets assigned to you, and then you need to make some changes to the code based upon some new feature or some bug or whatever else. So you have a local clone of the repository that you've cloned. If you're using Garrett, it's using SSH and their SSH keys over a specific port. And so once you configure that, and that's all documented within our wiki, you basically have a local clone and you're ready to go. You can work however you normally work. Most people that I'm aware of are working through Eclipse to work on those projects, but it doesn't have to be. So at that point, you make changes, you commit it locally, and then you want to upload it to VLab for review. And so the way that this works is that if you have Garrett configured, and to do so, you can actually specify that all code needs to go through review before it actually makes it to the repository. And so what do I mean by a review? So let's just take a look at one of these examples. So this is a project that I'm involved with. It's an AWIPS 2 project, and we developed a new capability within AWIPS to a new feature to basically track features and display them in mediagrams. And so anyway, a bug was identified, so I assigned that to one of our developers, actually working within NASA Sport down in Huntsville, Alabama. So he then fixed the issue, and he submitted it back. So it's in my pending list now to go out and review this. So one of the other team members, you can see, has a +2 here. You can see here this says Jenkins has verified it. And so what's meant by that is that, so I have access right within here to come in here and take a look at the code changes. So I can see what sort of changes Jason made to the code to address this fix. And then once, if I have questions or comments on it, I can actually come in here inline and put my comments right in here. You know, what were you thinking? Or great job, or whatever. So, you know, you're going to save it. And then once that gets saved, it's posted as a draft comment. So I'm going to discard this because I'm fine with his change. So you can loop through, you know, if for example, I have an issue with his changes, either visually, or normally what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at it visually, but I'm also, to really be thorough about it, I'm going to download his patch to confirm that it works for me. And so, you know, what I can do there is I can come in and I can say, I'll go back up to the change, and you see this link right here. So I have a local clone of the repository, so all that I need to do is copy this, go to my local repo, and paste that in place, and it's going to fetch out this particular version so that I can test that version and make sure that it's working as intended. And so that's, you know, an additional level of review. It's not just visually inspecting it, but making sure that, yeah, it works for me too. So once I'm happy with this, or maybe I'm not happy with it, if I've got some comments within here, they would show up. I can go into the review button, and I can then, if I had comments, I could just publish those comments, and that would then appear in the form of an email, generate emails to the person that submitted it as well as the other reviewers. So they then would have the chance to reply to those comments in line. They could also, if there are some coding problems, I could go in here and say, look, I prefer that you don't submit this. You need to address the issues I've identified. So I'd give it a -1. Most people aren't going to have this verified option. I'll talk about that in a moment. So I would do that, and then what's going to happen is the communication is through email. They're going to come back in. They'll address those issues. They're going to do a commit, amended commit. And one thing that you'll note, and I'm getting into a little bit of detail here, but there's a change ID that's part of this commit that gets generated by a post-commit hook. And so this ID is used by Garrett to be able to track subsequent commits. So if I do an amended commit, it's going to look at that ID and say, oh, this is just another version. So it'll create patch set number 2. And then I can go back in, and the whole thing starts over where you can review it. You can compare the differences between patch set 1 and patch set 2. Right now I've only got base and 1 on here, but if there were multiple ones, it would say base 1, 2, and I can compare between those. So that it's very powerful. And then once we're all good, then someone with the role, this is all role-based, so within this project, Tracking Medium project, we define particular roles. And this is something that we get this set up for you initially, and then you guys, as the project owners, have the ability to change these rules. But it's the rules within Garrett, if you're not really, they can be a little confusing, but we got documentation on it, and we're here to help. but basically if you're familiar with Git or if you know the internals of Git, it's somewhat intuitive. I have to be honest, it's one of the areas that's taken me the longest to get a handle on. But so within this project, we define access rules. And so, basically there are different roles for each of these groups, and they have the ability to do different things. Like, the Mediagram integrators have the role to be able to push changes directly to the repo. So they don't necessarily have to go through review. But most people would not have that role. And so most people are going to have to actually push it for review. So anyway, so that's that. So the change gets pushed. Let me go back. So we're here, and they've pushed it. So I'm sorry, it's been reviewed. Let's say I'm happy with this. I would give it a +2. And then this publish and submit option shows up. And so submitting is the actual action of submitting it to whatever branch they've specified. Went to the Dev 15.1.1 Tracking Mediagram branch. And then it's available for everyone within that branch. So so that's kind of what happens. The only other thing I didn't cover is Jenkins. So this is a verification component, and anything AWIPS related, we have specific jobs configured within Jenkins for each of the repos. And they're just doing some quick sanity checks, like we have to use certain formatting. So all of our commit messages have to start with VLab issue number, and then whatever issue number. And then what happens on the background within Jenkins is it's going to go in here, and it's going to confirm that, yes, they did supply a commit message. Number 2, that they use this format. Number 3, is this format, does it have the issue that they're referencing, is it in their pending list, and is it in the project that was referenced? And you get the idea. So that's what's being done to ensure the integrity of the underlying repository. So so that's what happens there. Any questions with regard to Jarrett or Garrett?
No questions.
Okay. So the last thing, since we have a little bit of time, I will show you Jenkins. And so Jenkins, again, these are go ahead.
No, we didn't say anything. Go ahead.
Okay. So so Jenkins and Garrett are optional. People can use things in different ways. By default, you get a basic either Subversion or Git repository, or you may actually use Redmine, just issue tracking without an underlying repository. That's up to the project owner. If you want to have these additional capabilities, they are options for you. And let me show you VLab. And there's Jenkins, if I can type. So within here, again, same login credentials. So I'm going to log in, and then once I logged in, so again, I'm an administrator, so I'm seeing a lot more than normal people would, but basically these are all the different jobs that have been set up for the corresponding repositories. And so within these jobs, they actually do certain things, like I just talked about. And so from a configuration perspective, it shows the build history, when did it go. And so oftentimes someone will check something in, they won't adhere to the standards. They're going to get an email that the verification failed. I didn't mention, but in order for you to be able to push a change to the underlying repository, to submit a change, it has to have passed the verification as well as the review phase or review steps. That's something that if you don't use an automated job, you can have someone verify it directly. So for example, in some projects, before I set up automated jobs, I would be the verifier, and I would just make sure, yeah, does it actually work? And so if it did pass that test for me, then I'd verify it. So, so within here, this is configuring it, and the most important thing here is, the jobs. It can be tied with Garrett, in that it can be kicked off from Garrett, and so there's a connector between the two. And so when we set up a job, we specify, okay, what's the underlying repository? Is it Git? Is it CVS? Is it Subversion? What's the trigger on it? In this case, it's a Garrett event. It could be that it's just being built periodically, so like cron type things. So some projects are set up within VLab where they may do a nightly or weekly build, and then there's also the ability to, like, these sorts of jobs are very lightweight. They're just doing some sanity checking. We couldn't, in theory, do a full build of AWS, but that takes several hours. So, that's not feasible. You wouldn't want to kick that off every time someone makes a change, but we can do that nightly, or we could do that weekly, depending upon our requirements and depending upon the project. But if it was a much smaller repo, you could do that. In fact, some people are, where they kick off a build, anytime someone checks something in, and then the rationale for this is, the idea behind continuous integration is that they're being notified right away if they've broken the build. And so it won't actually make its way into the repository until, that actually, it depends how you have it set up. So in some cases, they have Jenkins set up, and it kicks off a build, and it's actually going directly into the repository, so they're not using Garrett. But at least they know right away, yeah, hey, I broke it, and the project manager knows that, yeah, it's been broken too. So anything is possible. Well, almost anything is possible, because you can specify your own scripts to do things. You have to be cognizant of the fact that this is a shared resource. Jenkins, the jobs and things like that have a dedicated VM for them, so they're not going to impact other areas within the virtual lab, but it is a shared VM between all of the jobs running within VLab today. So far, that hasn't been an issue. So anyway, that's that. So I guess and see if you guys have any questions, or if you want me to dive into anything else in more depth.
Hey, Ken. This is Ryan. When I last got this briefing from you, one of my issues was that the Redmine was so separate from the collaboration, the community suite. And I think you had indicated at the time you had plans to look at that, look at either something else or merging the two somehow. Has there been any progress in that area?
Yeah, so it's one of the tasks I have is a single sign-on between the different components. And really what that would just mean is that, to be honest, the areas in which people are interacting the most are Redmine and collaboration services or Liferay Portal. Those are the two really active areas. If you're doing a lot of reviews, then you would be involved there as well on Garrett's side. Very rarely do people go into Jenkins. But to answer your question, it is still on the radar. We had hoped, or I had hoped, to use something called OpenID, because what I wanted to tie in with was Google, and the fact that almost all of our users are logging into Gmail because Noah's using that enterprise-wide. Unfortunately, OpenID, they're not supporting the old. I guess now it's an older version, and so the products that we're using, or these applications that we're using, haven't caught up yet. So we're giving it a little bit of time, because we had the option of either, I'm giving you kind of a long-winded answer, but in full disclosure. So basically, we had the option of going in and developing custom authentication components for what's called OpenID Connect 2.0 ourselves, which would have been a lot of work, or waiting for the community to do it for us. And so we're kind of in a waiting game at the moment. But that's something that I'm hoping to get back to in July. So, because it's a priority item.
The idea of using web services to sort of make the portal side more aware and integrate it with the
yeah, John, that's a very good point. And so that we are doing that, and that on the portal side, as John was indicating, so over here, there are web services going to Redmine, and so we are developing some things to dynamically update information from Redmine over into here, so that you can transparently see things like, oh, see, the top issues that I have. Look at, okay, how do I find out the listing of all the current projects, development service projects that exist? Right now, this is static. We're going to be replacing this in the near future with a portlet that shows it dynamically. And so, we want to make sure that everything is up to date and refreshed. So we're doing things like that, and those will be coming very soon. So it's, the single sign-on is a convenience. It's once you are logged in, as long as you're active within the site, you're not going to have to log in again. The session timeout is 2 hours here. On the Redmine side, it's even longer. So it's like, you just get used to typing your password. But if you're active, you're not having to do it very often. Any other questions?
Yeah, I got one. As far as documentation management, sorry, we got another phone here and it's echoing on me. Documentation management, can you delve a little bit more into how that's done? Like, for instance, the AWIPS documentation, how is that managed?
Okay, so if we go back to the AWIPS community, they're doing a combination of things. Some of the stuff is being managed through the wikis. Other areas, a lot of it's actually within the document library. And then some others is some of the things that are being managed through Google, they're just links, and so they're pointing to that. So within the library stage, so you can see within here, you can basically dive in, okay, AWIPS 2 documentation, and one thing is if you're looking for something, let's say, for example, you want the SSDD, okay? So, and then I can search over just this community, and we'll search for this. I find it much easier to find things through the search oftentimes, and so you can do that. It's taking its time this time. So within here, so now, they're doing things not the way I would do it, but it works. You can see here that we've got version 5, version 3, version 2. They're all separate documents. They could have just updated the document directly and not updated separate versions. So if we were to go to each of these, it would. Anyway, that's something that is a way that it can be managed. So if I click on this, you can see the document library itself supports versions. So, if I were doing it, I would have done it this way, and that is I would have come on here and uploaded a new document, and it would have been managed within here. The way they've done it is they've actually uploaded separate documents. So that's probably the best way of handling things. In terms of documentation. If you're collaboratively developing documentation, then I recommend that in that situation, you'd probably use the wiki. And we've got, the GoZAR community is using the wiki for a lot of collaboration and doing development of documentation, and there, you can be subscribed to the wiki, and you'll get strikeout, differences and things like that when people upload or make changes to it. So that can be very powerful and useful. There is the ability to, which I didn't highlight before, is you can get feedback from people on it, so it would capture that. You don't necessarily have to download the document. You can just click on here and see it interactively through the site before actually downloading it to make sure it's what you're interested in, so it creates previews. And then you can also comment on it, and then as the person that uploaded it, they'd be notified of that, and then it subscribes you by default. The other thing I didn't touch on is that it does use tags and categories throughout the site, and so that's another way that's helpful with regard to searching for things. It also allows us to, within here you can filter your results based upon these categories and tags. That's a way of filtering the results on the left. So if I were to come here, I can show you that.
Could you go over the permissions side of this real quick?
Yeah, sure. So permissions are, it's all role-based, and so if we go in, so each community, there are roles, and so you would have this admin option at the top, and so within each community, if you're a site administrator, you would be able to go in and look at the pages, the content, the users, and the configuration for each. And so, actually I should have clicked on users. We can do that. One sec. So if we come in here and we click on the users, and so if you've got groups of people that you want to give certain permission to, at the community level, you can create something called teams. And so those are groups of users. The permissions framework is, I can give like a whole hour-long presentation just on this, but it's, so the way it works is that it's multiple levels. So you can have permissions, for example, on a document. You can have permissions on a portlet on a page. You can have permissions on the page itself. So there are lots of levels. So for example, it may be that with your community, you might want the private pages as well as public pages. And so if you set up permissions in such a way, and so I guess I can show you. So let's come over here. So come into here, and so let me go to, let's see, so we'll go to pages. Okay, and so this is a look and feel of it, and then what I wanted to get to for you is actually, it's not here. So let me go back for a second. Okay, so edit, and then there's this permissions option, and so basically this is going to tell you on this particular page who can view it, the different roles that are there, and then like if you have teams and things like that, those would show up as well. So, I mean, do you have specific questions or things about the permissioning? The other area I can show you just to give you a sense is portal-wide. We have, so there are roles, and so the roles then dictate what people can do. And so, if we look at the, let me go to this site. So the site member or the site owner can come in here, and we can define permissions for them. And so You know, are they able to assign members, define permissions, so forth and so on. So it's quite a robust system. Pretty much anything is possible, but I'd need to know what you're trying to accomplish, and then I can help guide you. There's also, let me see, so if we're on a particular page, we can then specify who has access to the different pages. So, and that's configured. And again, as a site administrator, you have permission to do this. The other thing I didn't show you is, you can drag and drop. So like if I want to move this over to the right, I could do that. If I want to add a new portlet, that can be done. That's all configurable for the site administrator. If I want to add a new page, that can be done, or remove a page. It's all very easy to do. And then each of the portlets themselves has permissions, so or configurations, and part of that is the permissioning framework within it. So this is what I was talking about, like the portlet level, who can view it. So, and if the portlet is displaying documents, in order for someone to see it, they would also need access to the individual documents. So it's possible, for example, to have a public page where you're making your document library available, but users would only be able to see those where the guest role had access to the underlying documents. And some documents could be classified as guest, and some might be specified that only site members could see it. Sorry, that's probably too much. I gave you too much information. Any other questions?
Just as far, and I think you kind of hit on it. I mean, there is like, so if I'm trying to manage 100 documents, and I've got various different people that can edit this one document or another document. There's a workflow built into this that it wouldn't publish until it's approved, or
you can do that, yes. I can tell you that most people haven't done that, but it is possible to do that. And so in the case of the workflow for documents, it's actually controlled at the at this level here. It's not like a global. Some things are global. So for example, if you wanted to, you could actually enable workflow at the page level, meaning that if someone wants to make changes to the page, it actually has to go through some review. That's really hasn't been used by anyone, but it's possible. In the case of documents, there's a configuration that needs to take place, and so it's done at the you can do it at the folder level. So so you can see here that I selected a particular folder, I'm editing it, and I can specify that that I can either have it inherit from the parent folder or define a specific, and then I can come in here and select from the workflow that would be appropriate for this particular document type. And then you can specify too which of the document types you'd want to be tied to that. So there's the ability to have different document types, and there's a lot of flexibility here. But oftentimes the best thing to do is keep it simple at first.
Right. Well, I'll tell you kind of what I've been. We manage SharePoint here locally. And we're also I don't know if you know much about ISO 9001 or not, quality management systems.
Yeah, not a whole lot.
Okay, well, essentially we're required to control all our documentation.
Okay.
We do that currently from SharePoint, and it's like using a sledgehammer to drive nails. So I'm looking, it is. So I'm looking for, a pretty, lightweight tool that will allow us to manage documentation, without all that weight above it. But it's,
sure.
there's many, there's a dozen approvers of various different documentation. There's, you know, twice as many people that can edit documentation and submit it for approval and such. And we have to go through an annual review process and everything else. So, I mean, if I wanted to explore that more with someone, how would I go about doing that?
I would request a consultation. It'd probably be myself and maybe John. Yeah, there's a lot more. I haven't gone into it at all, but the workflow is all customizable, and so yeah, I don't know if it's tied to the groups, and it also, you know, is it a single level approval or multiple tiered or?
No, it's usually one level.
Okay, that's good. I mean, anything's possible, but that makes it a little bit simpler. So yeah, I can. If you make that request, who is this that's asking?
It's Clinton.
Okay.
Clinton Wallace.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So ask that, and that would give you the ability to. Yeah. I can show you a lot of other things. So.
And the documents can be pretty much any kind of standard format. Is it just, or is it just PDF or PDF, Word, PowerPoint, Excel?
It can pretty much be anything. There's some size limitations. I don't know how big the documents are you're dealing with, but as long as they're not like, okay, then that's no problem. So, yeah, they can be anything. It's the PDF thing only applies to if those will be scanned, and so then you're gonna get hits based upon the contents of the document itself. So.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I suspect we could probably fit your needs, and it would probably be much more elegant than SharePoint. I know that a lot of corporations and things like that move from SharePoint to Liferay because the cost is much lower, and it's also much easier to manage.
Secondly, we have for I don't know, a long time, 15 years, no, maybe not, 12, 13 years, used Mantis here internally for managing projects for trouble tickets and such. And if we wanted to use this for a trouble ticketing system, that's something we can do with this, with Redmine?
Yeah.
Okay, and then there's other people, I mean, and this is tight, not just software issues, but I mean,
sure.
Everything
yeah, sure.
Toilet won't flush to, this piece of software doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah, we've got people that are using it, within the Weather Service. Some of the WFOs are using it for bug tracking and management. It doesn't, it's not referencing. It doesn't have to have that, code component to it. So.
Okay. Let's think if there's anything else. I think Redmine looks very similar to what we've been doing with Mantis.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I've used Mantis before, and there's a lot of similarities.
Okay. Is there a way to import like a CSV into Redmine, or is it you have to do everything through the web GUI?
You mean in terms of like if you wanted to migrate an existing Mantis project over?
Yeah, that, or if I had built a project, like with 30 tasks or something, and is there a way that I could import that into Redmine, or?
Yeah, there's, it's kind of funny. I gave a training / we had a meeting on this today. So we've developed an importer that takes an Excel spreadsheet and imports all the issues within the spreadsheet, or the rows in the spreadsheet, into issues within Redmine. So if you have it in Excel format, then yes. The other thing that we're looking at turning on is the ability to create issues from emails, and so as well as update issues from emails. So that's another option that should be coming in the next couple of months.
Nice.
Hey, Ken, on your, I think you call them portlets. Is that what that's sort of what you call the crossover from the projects from the Redmine to the community, or a way to share data between the two?
Yeah. So each of the it's a nomenclature. It's a naming convention of these entities. So within a portal like this, each box you see here is a portlet, and it independently runs this code. So this is a portal container, and these are portlets. And then one of the things that we're doing is we're so I can show you actually. If we go to the default community, we developed this custom portlet for the project's NOAA's project repository. And so this is running code that runs inside of it, and it's basically allowing people to add new projects. And I suspect maybe you guys have had a demo on this, but so you can create new projects, not to be confused with the development projects. These are from tracking for NOAA's perspective, but you can do a lot within here. And so this is running code. So what I was referring to earlier is that we're developing some additional portlets that'll go out over to Redmine and gather information through web services over there.
So I guess what I was thinking is, if we had a project set up on the Redmine side and we were entering issues over there, it'd be really nice, via these forums on this side of the fence, if people could be notified, if they subscribe to a particular topic or something through the forums, and it, for next gen, for example, project, if I had my next gen team could be notified when there's a new ticket or something like that. So is that sort of functionality available?
Yeah, you could do that. I mean, today that's actually built into Redmine. So for each user, you can come in here and you go to My Account, and then within My Account, you've got these email notification settings, and so you can select it from these different settings. So for me, for certain projects, I want to know everything that's going on within it. And so this is something where I can go in here and I can say, okay, for tracking metograms and the RPM build and for these virtual lab community or projects, I'm notified via email anytime anything happens. And so that's configurable through here. The other thing you can do is you can just be notified on things that you care about. And so I can go into a particular project and go to an issue and watch it. And so what that means is if I'm watching it, I'm going to get notified. If a ticket is assigned to you, the default behavior is that you're going to get an email being notified that something's happened. If you write a ticket and assign it to someone else and they update that ticket, you'd get an email notification. So you can see that that's really built into the capabilities of Redmine already.
So it's really not linked to the community forum, though. So it's only linked to
not on this side. So yeah, there's really no connection between those two today.
Okay. So if I want to do something, I just probably need to request a consultation, and we can talk through how to do it best. Yeah,
that would be good. Or you may want to just go in and request a project and request a community if the community side interests you guys as well. And then you can use it. You don't necessarily, you could even set it up as a restricted community initially until you've got it in a state where you want to share it. But you can then play with it and then request a consultation, when you need more help or you need more information from us or things like that. So, and that's easy to do. Just go to, come over here, go into the communities or the development services page, and when I say over here, you're just logging into VLab.nsep.noaa.gov. And on the welcome page too, there's quick links on the right, so you can say request a new project, request a new community. Click on that, that'll take you right to it. fill it out, and then that we get notified as the administrators. And like I said, you typically are going to have it same day or the next day, unless you're requesting something really crazy.
Probably do that. But something pretty crazy.
Okay. We'll see.
All right. Anyone else got questions? Well, Kenneth, thank you very much for the demo today. It gave me a lot of thoughts on how we might be able to use VLab. Correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, it kind of looks like VLab is becoming kind of a centralized repository for code, and then two, it's becoming the collaboration tool largely for all of Weather Service in terms of development. Does that sound about right?
Yeah. And then on the collaboration services side, it's not just development. I didn't really highlight that, but you can peruse the different communities. There are a lot of communities within there, and some of them aren't necessarily tied to specific development, but the Sues and Does they're starting to use it too. It's gaining a lot of traction, and that's good, because the more information that's in there, the more valuable it becomes. So, all right, well, you guys have a good weekend, and we'll be looking forward to seeing your guys' requests. So.
All right. Well, thank you very much, and thanks for staying late on a Friday for us. He's in California. You're in California?
I'm in California, so it's good.
Oh,
John's the one you have to thank.
Yeah, it's almost 5:30 here. By the way, I will post the recording for this demo, so anybody there who was interested but wasn't able to attend can certainly check it out at their leisure.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay, you guys have a good day.
You too.